it do? SRT gang. It's your boy with the fat SwaggyReacts, and we are back with another reaction video, man. And shouts out to the homie Mr. Ballen, man. Like, we're gonna be checking out one of his videos today, man. This is one of his newer ones, like he dropped a few days ago, called like "Don't Do Like What He Did." Now we all know from our previous videos with Mr. Ballen, man, like these are bangers. You feel me? If you guys like a guy telling like a real creepy stories, man, like make sure you guys are tuned in to Scary Hour, man. I drop one of these every night at midnight, man. We also do like Mr. Nightmare, like Luke's Top 5, Slap Ham, like, you know, like all those like scary channels, man. So let's get this video here to 200 likes, man. If you guys enjoy these type of reactions, hit that subscribe button. Most of all, hit that thumbs up button. Let's get this video to 200 likes, man. So without further ado, Mr. Ballen, let's get into it, man. Let's get. Oh, wait. I need everyone to join the Discord. It'll be in the description, gang. Please, ASAP. Let's go.
Today's episode deals almost exclusively with suicide and with depression, and so I wanted to start this by saying if you or someone you know is struggling with mental health, there are resources that can help you. I've left a number of them in the description below. But
man, yeah, definitely, man. Please, if you guys know someone who's going through that, or if you're like going through that, hopefully like my videos can just bring you some closure, just get you throughout the day. But at the same time, bro, like get help as soon as possible, man, because that is something very, very serious, man, and I don't want to see no one like going through that. So like if you guys know anyone, please, like, you know, just do your research and get some help, please. Let's get into it.
Before we get into today's story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious, or for a second, and then proceed to change their all notifications. In the early 1980s, Richard Sumner was in his 20s, and he was a scenic designer for a major opera house just outside of London. Richard was a truly gifted artist and was known to be a very intelligent man. In 1984, when Richard was 29, he started to notice he was having a really hard time focusing. Like, he couldn't keep basic information straight in his head. It would just get all jumbled up, and it was making his job exponentially more difficult. Initially, Richard assumed it must just be the product of working lots of long hours and being under lots of pressure all the time. But after taking a few days off from work, his mental focus did not come back. In fact, it only got worse. And so when he told his friends and his colleagues about it, they urged him to go see a doctor. And so finally he did. He went to a doctor, and the doctor put him through a series of tests and was really only able to rule out different medical conditions. They were not able to pinpoint what was actually causing this mental disturbance. And so Richard was pretty frustrated because he thought by going to the doctor, they would figure out what it was and, you know, give him a pill and that would make everything better, but that wasn't happening. He was left with a lot of questions. And so Richard went to another doctor and another doctor for additional opinions, and they too were not able to get to the bottom of what was going on with him. And so finally, Richard found himself sitting across from a psychologist asking them if they had the answer. And they did. They informed Richard that he was unfortunately developing schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is a very serious mental disorder in which people interpret reality abnormally. Schizophrenics usually experience some combination of hallucinations, delusions, extremely disordered thinking and behavior that can be disabling. Richard was horrified at this diagnosis, and he asked a psych, you know, what can I do? How can I get better? And the psych would tell him that unfortunately there is no cure for schizophrenia. However, medical treatment has been shown to be very effective in some people, especially when it's caught early. And it seems like we're catching your disorder fairly early. And so Richard immediately began the medical treatment plan, and he seemed to be one of the lucky few that benefited tremendously from it. In fact, within just days of being told of this diagnosis, he was back to work at the opera house. But over the years, despite Richard diligently staying on his medical treatment plan, he just continued to kind of spiral because of of this disorder, and it was becoming more and more apparent at work that Richard was just not the same anymore. He had lost that mental focus that he was known for, and he was perpetually fatigued. And so in 1996, so 12 years after his original diagnosis, Richard finally had to step away from his job at the Opera House. He just couldn't do the work anymore. Although Richard was eligible for governmental assistance because of his schizophrenia, the money he would receive from those benefits would not be enough to cover the costs associated with living in his flat in London. And so he was forced to move back home with his family in North Wales. Even though his family welcomed him with open arms, Richard immediately felt like he was this huge burden to them, and within a year of having moved back home, Richard had fallen into this deep, dark depression.
Yeah, like, and that's how it be, man, because once you move out your parents' house or whatever for like a certain amount of time, bro, you like you haven't been, you know, like going through, like dealing with no one else's rules, this, that, and the third. It ain't nothing like having your own, bro. I say that to everybody, bro. Like, I mean, yeah, it's always good to have a roommate, this, that, and the third, but having your own is always, you know what I'm saying, like the move, you feel me? Because you can do whatever you want to in your house, you feel me? But, But depression is crazy, man, and it's real out here. It's real out here, man.
Within a year of having moved back home, Richard had fallen into this deep, dark depression, and he decided he did not want to live anymore. So one day that fall, Richard left his house and he walked to a store where he purchased handcuffs. And then he took those handcuffs, he left the store, and he walked away from town towards this secluded forest that was not too far away. And when he got to the forest, he picked a trail and he started walking down it, and he kept looking over his shoulder until finally he could not actually see the town anymore. He was fairly far into these woods. At that point, he deviated off of the trail and walked for several more minutes until he came to a stop in front of this tree that had some fairly thick, low-hanging branches. At that point, he took his handcuffs and he connected one cuff to one of these branches and made sure it would not come off, and then he connected the other cuff to his right wrist. And once he was fully secured, he leaned back against the tree and he began to wait. It's unclear what drove Richard to choose such a slow and torturous method for ending his life, but apparently after 4 days of leaning up against this tree and not dying, he began to have second thoughts about it. He was desperately hungry and thirsty and extremely tired because he was in this kind of semi-upright position that didn't really allow him to sleep. And he just ate from standing and kind of hanging on his wrist for as long as he had been. And he was worried that he was still days away from dying. He also started to feel really bad about the effect his death would have on his family. They loved him, and even though they...
man, because you got to think about stuff like that, man. Your parents, bro, are sitting here like, damn, like, where's our son? He was here, like, we haven't seen him in 4 days. Like, bro, like they're probably going through it. You know what I'm saying? And now you're having second thoughts, but you know, like, come on, man. Like, you shouldn't even be out there in the first place, dog. Just be thankful that your parents are even, you know what I'm saying, like, willing to even let you come back home, because some parents wouldn't. For real, bro. Like, from where I'm from, shit.
Bad about the effect his death would have on his family. They loved him, and even though they knew he was depressed, they were not thinking he was suicidal. And so this would be a huge shock, and it would be extremely upsetting for years and years to come. Richard also started thinking about the poor soul that was going to stumble across his body in the middle of the woods after he had passed, and he thought, what a terrible thing for someone to have to go through. And so on the night of the 4th day that he's been out in the woods chained up to this tree, Richard finally decides that he just can't go through with it. And so with his left hand, his free hand, he reaches into his pocket, he gets the handcuff key, and just a couple of seconds later, he's out, he's free. And so he hobbles his way back to the path, and he makes his way out of the forest and walks all the way home. When he goes inside, his sister is there, and she's totally shocked to see him. She sees the state he's in, and she's asking, you know, are you okay? What have you been doing? Where have you been? We've been so worried. And that's when Richard confides in her that he had been in the forest and he had just attempted suicide. And so his sister is totally devastated at this news, and she tries to comfort him and remind him that she and the rest of the family loves him, and please don't attempt suicide again. We can get you help. We can put you in touch with professionals. We can do anything you want, but please don't do something you can't undo. Richard didn't make any promise.
Exactly, man, because we only get one of these people, man. We only get one of these. Like, we have to cherish every single moment, bro. Because, like, I mean, we never know when the Lord is going to call us up. We don't know this. You know what I'm saying? So don't just try to, no, man. Like, don't commit no suicide. Don't do nothing crazy like that. Please, like, just get help at the end of the day, man. Because it's still people out there that love you. there's still people out there that love you, bro. Like can't wait to see you like tomorrow. Know what I'm saying? Like, come on, man. Come on, man.
You can do anything you want, but please don't do something you can't undo. Richard didn't make any promises to her, but he was very touched at how much she cared. He thanked her, he gave her a hug, and then he went to his room and he went to bed. The next morning when Richard got up, he had this sense that, he had just survived a suicide attempt. And so in many ways, he now had this new life he was living. And so what better time to kind of forge ahead and build a new life with the current construct and the current limitations that he had, and stop focusing so much on the life that he had lost back in London, because that life doesn't exist anymore. And so for the next couple of years, Richard did just focus on his new life in North Wales. He was diligent about keeping up with his medical treatments. He tried to spend time with his family. He was doing all the right things, but his schizophrenia only got worse. And one of the ways it was really manifesting itself in his life was this deep-seated paranoia that his family secretly did not want him in the house, that they looked at him as this parasite, as he called it. And so he really developed this awful view of himself, and he fell back into a very deep state of depression, and before long he was suicidal again. And so in 1999, which is 3 years after his first suicide attempt, Richard decided he would try again. He got his handcuffs.
Come on, man. Like, why do you... Oh, my gosh. He's just going through these phases where he think his parents, are looking down at him. And, like, why is he still here? Like, bro, why... Man, like, depression is serious, man. It's serious, man.
Years after his first suicide attempt, Richard decided he would try again. He got his handcuffs and he left the house without talking to his family, and he walked to that secluded forest on the edge of town. He went down the trail, he veered off, he found a tree with some sturdy, low-hanging branches, and he cuffed himself to it and began the long wait. But after only being there for a couple of hours, Richard started to have those same second thoughts he had while he was out here in his first attempt. He started to worry about his family, and he worried about the person who was going to find his body, and he couldn't help but think about how painful and miserable those 4 days had been when he was out there waiting to die. And so after agonizing over what he should do next, Richard ultimately decided that, again, he just couldn't go through with it, and so he pulled the key out of his pocket, he undid the cuff, and he left the forest and he walked back home. After this second suicide attempt, Richard again tried to find meaning in having this new life, but he just couldn't shake this growing paranoia brought on by his schizophrenia that his family secretly wanted him to leave the house, that he was this parasite and that they all hated him, he was this terrible person, and it was just overwhelming for Richard. And so eventually he would actually confide in his sister that he felt this way, that he felt like he was this leech on the family.
Exactly,
and she
man.
was
Like, I don't know why he feeling like this, bro, because there's people out here in this world, bro, that don't even know their parents, or out here living out, that are literally homeless, bro. You know what I'm saying? Like, your parents are willing to take you in, it don't matter how old you are, bro. Like you're still their baby at the end of the day. Like, you're still like their child. You know what I'm saying? So you're always gonna be welcome. You're always gonna be welcome, bro. Man, I'm sorry, y'all. Like, this is crazy to me, man. This is crazy. This is crazy, man.
In his sister that he felt this way, that he felt like he was this leech on the family. And she would say, "No, Richard, we love you unconditionally. We want you here. Do not leave. This is your home." But Richard just couldn't believe her. That paranoia was so strong, he just couldn't see reality for what it was. And so in April of 2002, which was 3 years after his second suicide attempt, Richard grabbed the handcuffs and headed out for another attempt. But after securing himself to a tree in the middle of the forest, once again his conscience cut through all the chaos inside of his mind and told him, "Don't do it." And he listened. But this time, after freeing himself and getting back home, he didn't feel any sense of relief or any desire to kind of live this new life he's been given. Instead, he longed to be back in the forest, chained up to a tree. He confided in his sister that he had now tried suicide 3 separate times, and he was just at a loss for what he should do next. And so, of course, his sister is totally shocked and saddened by this news, and she tells him over and over again how much she loves him, and please do not go back in that forest. Do not not hurt yourself. And in fact, his sister would go on to tell the rest of the family about these suicide attempts. And so before long, the whole family is telling Richard how much they love him and that he's not a parasite. Let us know how we can help you, or let us connect you to someone who can. But it was just not enough. And less than a week after his third failed suicide attempt, Richard grabbed his handcuffs, he left the house, and began walking towards that secluded forest for one final try. That night, when Richard did not come home, the family obviously was very concerned about this, and so they called the police and they reported him missing, and they explained he was suicidal and that the best place to look for him was going to be in that forest. But after several days of looking all over town and out in that forest, the police could not find Richard or any trace of him, and so unfortunately they had to turn the search off. And so the family was crushed, and all they could do was just hope and pray that Richard again changed his mind and came back home. 3 years later, a woman and her 2 dogs decided—
No, 3 years later.
to go out for a walk and came back home. 3 years later, a woman and her 2 dogs decided to go out for a walk inside of that secluded North Wales forest. At some point on their walk, they left the path and got kind of lost in the thick of the forest. And so as she's walking around trying to get her bearings, trying to figure out where the trail is, she winds up going behind this one big tree and she enters into this clearing. And on the other side of the clearing, up against this tree, are the badly decomposed remains of Richard Sumner. Out of fear, she reflexively turns and runs with her 2 dogs and just keeps on running until she actually does find the trail again. And so once she's on the trail, she kind of makes a mental note of where she is, and then she runs out of the forest and she contacts—
Yo, what? Three years later.
2 dogs and just keeps on running until she actually does find the trail again. And so once she's on the trail, she kind of makes a mental note of where she is, and then she runs out of the forest and she contacts authorities about the body she saw. And so the authorities, they come out to the forest and they eventually are able to find Richard's location. And initially they believed they were dealing with a murder victim because they see this body that's been handcuffed to a tree. But after police went through Richard's pockets and found a house key that had an address on it, they went to that address and it turned out it was Richard's family's house. And after speaking with them, the police were able to confirm that the body they had just found was in fact Richard Sumner, the suicidal man that had gone missing 3 years earlier, and so almost certainly his death was a suicide. Even though this looked like a total open and shut case, the medical examiner still needed to officially rule on the cause of death. And so the medical examiner went out into the woods, he went right up to Richard and he began looking him over, and right away he noticed some disturbing discrepancies. There were deep scuff marks all around the branch where the handcuff had been connected to the tree. And the other handcuff that was connected to Richard's wrist had been jammed up over his thumb all the way up to his knuckles. The examiner asked the police in the area if anybody had found the handcuff key, and they said they had. It was laying on the ground about 15 feet in front of Richard Sumner. And that's when the medical examiner realized the horrible truth about what most likely happened to Richard. In his report, the medical examiner theorized that Richard had indeed gone into this forest in order to commit suicide. He had walked over 200 yards into this forest, way off the beaten path, into the deepest, thickest part where no people went. And he most likely went there because he specifically didn't want anyone to happen upon him. He wanted privacy. And then after handcuffing himself to that branch of that tree, he did something that he did not do in his previous 3 suicide attempts. He pulled the handcuff key out of his pocket and then he threw it in front of him so far that he could not get it back again. And then tragically, Richard came to the same conclusion that he had come to in his previous 3 attempts. He realized he did not actually want to die. He couldn't get to the key, and when he yelled out for help, he was so far away from society, no one could hear his voice. And so for the next several agonizing days, Richard yanked and tugged and pulled on that handcuff until finally he painfully got the cuff to slip up over his thumb all the way up to his knuckle, but he just couldn't get it to go over his knuckle. And and he didn't have a knife to cut the branch down or to even cut his own hand off. And so he used the cuff that was actually on the branch and began twisting it back and forth to maybe hopefully saw through the branch, but there just wasn't enough friction inside that cuff, and so it made almost no progress. Also, Richard probably tried to pull and yank on the branch itself to try to break it to free himself that way, but without a tool, there was no way he could have broken this branch. It was just too sturdy. And so after what must have been several horrifying days, Richard ultimately died of a heart attack out of fear of the situation he had put himself in, or he died from starvation. As a result of his findings, the medical examiner was not able to label Richard Sumner's death a suicide. He basically had to call it an accident. So that's going to do it, guys. But before we wrap up, I just want to say to all the people out there that are struggling, that are maybe thinking about suicide or harming themselves in some way, stop and tell someone. Tell someone you love, tell someone you trust. And if you don't want to do that, then just call this number. They are open 24 hours a day. There are
Please call this number, please.
Trained professionals on the other side of that line that know how to help you. You just got to call. Help is available. You are not alone.
Oh my gosh, bro. Yes, I'm staying right here on this right here, bro. Call these numbers. If you guys are in any of these places, please call, man, because this is crazy, man. Like, the suicide hotlines are literally like real, man, because there's people out here that don't feel wanted, that don't feel loved, and just don't feel like that they want to be around anymore, man. And we don't need this happening, bro. We already like losing people enough to these, you know what I'm saying, cop violences and all that, man. So bro, like, this is really a crazy video for me, man. I really enjoyed, like, well, I didn't enjoy hearing what happened, but it was a good video, man. Let me know what you guys thought about this reaction by liking or disliking the video, and make sure you guys are tuned in when I drop another one tomorrow, man, because this was crazy, man. This one was really crazy, man. I love y'all, gang, and I'll be back tomorrow. SRT gang. I am out this thing, man. Let's get it.